When I turned 66, my long-lost husband, Michael Evans, returned home in glory. Back then, he had left behind just one sentence: "Take good care of my parents and our child," and then vanished without a trace. I gritted my teeth and all by myself raised our daughter and took care of his parents until they both passed away at 80 years old. At the end of my life, as I looked at my grown daughter, I felt a deep sense of comfort, believing I had fulfilled the trust Michael had placed in me. Yet my daughter held my hand, tears streaming down her face, and told me there was an old friend who had come to see me. The next moment, I saw the man who had disappeared for 40 years, my husband Michael. He stood at my hospital bedside, impeccably dressed, with his wife and child by his side. Speaking as if he were granting me charity, he said, "No matter what, we were husband and wife in name. You raised my daughter, sent off my parents, so now it's only right that I come to see you off one last time." Only then did I realize that he had been alive all along. Not only alive, but he had remarried, had a new family, and had become a wealthy businessman. Rage surged through me so violently that I nearly passed out. When I opened my eyes again, what greeted me was that old farewell letter. "Take good care of my parents and child. I'm leaving." Seeing those familiar words again, I shuddered as if struck by lightning. It was the very first letter I had received 6 months after Michael disappeared. In my previous life, I had naively believed he had taken his own life. I hadn't known the truth until that year when, lying sick in a hospital bed from a lifetime of hardship, I saw Michael appear with his new wife and child, standing before me saying he had come to send me off. His wife had smooth, youthful skin and a healthy complexion, while I, lying in bed, was pale, wrinkled, and sickly. 2 completely different worlds. Only then did I finally understand. The "I'm leaving" in that letter didn't mean death. It meant he had started a new family elsewhere. Thinking of this, my body trembled with rage. Since Michael had decided to fake his death and his parents had helped him deceive me, then I would make sure he died properly. I took the farewell letter to the town's photo studio, enlarged Michael's ID photo, and made it into a memorial portrait. Then I went to Uncle Joe's house at the entrance of the village and asked him to organize a band to play funeral music at my house. It didn't take long for news to spread through the village that my husband, Michael Evans, had passed away. I cried my way around the village several times, hiring the band, printing the portrait, and informing every relative and neighbor. When the villagers swarmed into my courtyard, they saw me clutching Michael's memorial portrait, weeping bitterly. My 1-year-old daughter sat beside me, wailing loudly. His parents were called back from the fields. As soon as they stepped through the door, they froze in place. My father-in-law, furious, shouted, "Emily, what on earth are you doing?" Tearfully, I pulled out that farewell letter and said, "Dad, Mom, Michael has passed. I need to send him off properly. It's just a pity that we don't even know where his body is, but the proper rites cannot be skipped." I caught a glimpse of my father-in-law's face as it turned red, then white, then red again. Finally, in a fit of rage, he snapped, "Nonsense. How can you declare Michael dead based on just one letter? Are you cursing my son?" My father-in-law insisted that Michael was still alive, just caught up in some situation that had forced him to leave home. Staring at the large portrait of Michael placed in the mourning hall, he marched over and started berating me, shouting, "Put that photo away. Tell Joe to take the band and leave." While speaking, he exchanged a look with my mother-in-law. She quickly turned around and started ushering people out of the yard. "Michael just hasn't been in touch for a few days. It's all just a misunderstanding. Everyone, please go home." Seeing this, I rushed into the courtyard, standing firm and shouting, "Dad, Mom, do you know where Michael went?" Their eyes darted away guiltily. My mother-in-law kept glancing nervously at my father-in-law. He evaded, saying, "How would we know? The letter didn't say anything specific. We're just guessing too." They turned their backs, refusing to meet my gaze. Deliberately raising my voice, I said, "Since you're so sure Michael is fine, I'll go to his company in the city to find him." I refuse to believe a full-grown man can just disappear into thin air. I scooped up my daughter and tried to squeeze through the crowd, determined to leave. But my in-laws rushed to block me, shouting, "You can't go. You absolutely can't go." In my past life, I had tried to go find him too. But they had stopped me back then as well. And off saying Michael was just temporarily upset. And if I caused a scene at his workplace, it would ruin his career. And even if he wanted to come back, he wouldn't be able to. I had been so foolish back then. I was startled by their words. Only now did I finally understand. They had been colluding all along, working together to keep the truth from me. My mother-in-law clung to my waist with all her strength, while my father-in-law stood in front of me with arms wide open, blocking my way. "Emily, you can't go. What if Michael was just having a moment of weakness? If he comes back in a few days and you've ruined his reputation, he'll lose his job." It was the same line they always used. My hair was disheveled from struggling, my appearance miserable and pitiful. I cried and pleaded with them, tears streaming down my face. "Dad, Mom, whether Michael is dead or alive, we have to find out. What if he's already gone? What good is protecting his job if he's no longer alive? Isn't life more important than work?" Hearing my words, the neighbors around us chimed in. Of course, life is more important than work. Michael's parents have really gotten confused in their old age. How can they care more about a job than their son's life? Dead or alive, you still have to go look. Voices rose one after another in agreement. Seeing that their arguments no longer held any weight, and my in-laws quickly changed their tone. "Emily, don't rush. Let's have your Uncle Tom go to the city and ask around first." It had been the same in my previous life. Uncle Tom had gone to the city, only to come back saying that no one at Michael's factory knew anything. They assumed he was depressed and told me not to worry. But I couldn't relax. I wanted to go ask myself. Yet back then, my mother-in-law had an accident. Her foot was trampled by an ox while working the fields. She claimed that injuries to tendons and bones took 100 days to heal and insisted that I stay to take care of her. In the end, I never made it to the city. This time, seeing through their intentions, I pressed harder. "Dad, this is a huge matter. I'll go to the city with Uncle Tom." My father-in-law wanted to refuse again, but the villagers all sided with me. Realizing he had no way out, he finally softened his tone and said, "All right, tonight we'll have Uncle Tom come over. We'll sit down and talk it over together. Everyone, let's disperse for now." That evening, Uncle Tom never came. After dinner, my father-in-law went out and returned later, claiming he had spoken with Uncle Tom and that he would go to the city tomorrow. As I carefully wiped Michael's memorial portrait, my father-in-law frowned and said irritably, "There's still no conclusion yet. Can you put that portrait away?" I refused. There's an old saying that preparing memorial items early can ward off bad luck. Keeping the portrait out might just turn things around for Michael. Frustrated, my father-in-law stormed off. Before dawn the next morning, a sudden sharp scream echoed from the courtyard. It was my mother-in-law. She had been kicked by the ox. In my past life, in order to stop me from going to Michael's workplace, she had staged an accident, claiming the ox stepped on her foot. This time, to ensure the ox would be more aggressive, I had secretly mixed a bowl of chicken blood into its feed the night before. The smell of blood made the ox restless and irritable. Sure enough, chaos broke out early in the morning. Soon, I heard my father-in-law yelling desperately, "Emily, your mom's been kicked by the ox." I took my time getting up, calmly getting dressed, and strolled out to the courtyard. There, I saw a pool of blood on the ground. My mother-in-law lay there, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. Clearly, the injury wasn't minor. I quickly shouted, "Dad, find a car right away. We need to get Mom to the city hospital. She might have internal injuries, and if we delay, she could die." Even after my death in my previous life, I had been so filled with anger that my spirit lingered near Michael and his new wife for a long time. I remembered clearly. Their wedding should have been just days away. If we rushed to the city now, we might catch them in the act. Flustered, I called the neighbors to help. My father-in-law insisted we shouldn't go to the city and instead took my mother-in-law to the village clinic. But when the barefoot doctor there examined her, he just shook his head and said, "No good. You need to take her to the city for proper tests. Our equipment here isn't enough to treat this kind of injury." Lying in the back of the cart, my mother-in-law kept coughing uncontrollably, her face pale as a sheet. Blood spilled from her mouth again and again. My father-in-law lowered his head, furiously smoking his pipe in silence. After a long moment of struggle, he finally clenched his teeth and agreed to head to the city. I went back home and entrusted my daughter to our neighbor, Aunt Linda. I packed some of my mother-in-law's toiletries and followed my father-in-law to the city. By the time we got my mother-in-law admitted to the hospital, it was already mealtime. My stomach growled loudly, and my father-in-law's stomach rumbled right after. He asked me to go buy some food. I turned my empty pockets inside out and showed him. "Dad, I don't have any money left. Everything we brought was used to pay the hospital deposit. I need to go back to the village and borrow some money from the neighbors." My father-in-law stared at me for a long moment, then waved his hand to let me go. The moment I stepped out of the hospital gate, I turned and headed straight for Michael's workplace, looking for my dad's old colleague, Uncle Jack. Back then, when my father had a work accident at the factory offered to compensate by giving a job to a family member. Michael insisted on taking the job himself, claiming that working was too hard for me. It was Uncle Jack who had helped arrange Michael's position. Now, if I was going to expose Michael at his wedding, Uncle Jack had to be there. When I found Uncle Jack, I explained the situation, and after borrowing 50 yuan from him for my mother-in-law's expenses, I rushed back to the village. I informed everyone about my mother-in-law's hospitalization and how serious the doctor said it was. Upon hearing she might need surgery, the neighbors all insisted they should go to the hospital to visit her. I didn't refuse. Some neighbors brought eggs. Others brought homemade brown sugar. The next day, a group of more than a dozen of us packed into vehicles and headed for the city. After visiting my mother-in-law, I took the neighbors out for a meal. Although it took 2 hours by car to reach the city from the county, once we arrived, it felt to them like entering a grand wonderland. Everything was new and curious. Relying on my memory, I led everyone to the city's largest restaurant, the People's Restaurant. More importantly, Michael's wedding was being held there. If my memory served right, it was happening that very day. Before we left the hospital, I had even called Uncle Jack, telling him I wanted to treat him to a meal to express my thanks, and I arranged for him to meet us at the People's Restaurant. As I led the group inside, everyone couldn't stop murmuring in amazement, praising everything they saw. I stared directly at the side of the main hall, where a wedding was underway. I nudged Aunt Linda beside me and said, "City folks are so fancy. Look at how beautiful their wedding clothes are." Aunt Linda squinted into the distance, seeming unsure, then took a few hurried steps forward. Suddenly she spun around and shouted, "Emily, that groom looks just like Michael." Everyone who heard her looked over curiously. The more they stared, the more convinced they became. "Could there really be someone who looks so much like him in this world?" someone whispered. But another said, "Well, the vibe doesn't quite feel like Michael." Michael Evans was holding the hand of his new bride, going around offering toasts. I clenched my teeth and said bitterly, "Let's go take a closer look." As we moved closer, I clearly saw the familiar mole under Michael's chin. Aunt Linda saw it too. Hesitantly, she called out, "Michael?" At the sound of his name, Michael instantly looked up. The moment he saw us, he quickly turned his head, trying to avoid eye contact, pretending not to see us. Still trying to act like he didn't know us? Without hesitation, I stormed up and slapped him across the face. "Michael Evans, you're marrying another woman without even informing me?" Michael first looked furious, then panicked, but quickly collected himself and hid behind his new wife, claiming he didn't know me. Aunt Linda stomped her foot and pointed at him. "Michael, your auntie watched you grow up. Even if you turned into ashes, we'd still recognize you. Didn't you leave Emily a farewell letter? How can you be here, marrying someone else?" The villagers behind me, at first just curious, now fully understood what was going on, and their outrage exploded. "Michael, we almost didn't recognize you," someone shouted. "You already had a wife back home. How can you be holding another wedding here?" "You left just a letter and disappeared," another said. "Don't you know your mom's in the hospital now and about to have surgery?" Everyone started talking over each other, furious. The scene descended into complete chaos. Catherine, Michael Evans' new wife, whether from panic or anger, blushed furiously and pointed at me. "You all need to stop causing trouble. This is my husband. I am his wife. When has he ever been married before?" We don't know you people. If you keep making baseless accusations, we're calling the police. All of the guests present were Catherine's relatives. In order to hide his previous marriage, Michael hadn't even told his colleagues about it. But since I had come to confront him, I wasn't unprepared. I glanced toward the hotel entrance and saw Uncle Jack walking in at just the right moment. I raised my voice and called out, "Uncle Jack! I'm over here." Everyone turned their heads to look at Uncle Jack. Michael's face instantly turned ghostly pale. To be fair, he did have fair skin and was good-looking. After half a year of pampered living in the city, he looked even more handsome than he had in the village. No wonder Catherine had fallen for him. Michael, standing behind Catherine, tried to slip away quietly, but I grabbed him firmly. Staring straight at the bright boutonniere pinned to his chest, I spoke with a choked voice. "Uncle Jack, didn't you say Michael went out of town to attend a friend's wedding? Then why is he here, marrying someone else?" As I spoke, I suddenly dropped to the ground and started wailing loudly. I had to raise our daughter all by myself while caring for his aging parents. To make a better life for the family, I worked like a man every day, hauling stones from the mountains until my back was bruised and bloodied. If it hadn't been for my mother-in-law getting injured by the ox, I wouldn't have come to the city, and I wouldn't have caught Michael marrying another woman. "Uncle Jack, you have to stand up for me." Uncle Jack, already shocked, snapped back to reality at my words. He turned his gaze sharply toward Michael, his face dark with anger. "Michael Evans, you have a wife back home. How can you marry someone else here in the city? That's illegal, do you understand?" Michael stammered, trying to defend himself. "We didn't register the marriage. Legally, it doesn't count." Hearing that, the neighbors got even angrier. "You held a wedding ceremony. Everyone in the village knows about it. How can you say it doesn't count?" someone shouted. "Besides, you only got that factory job because Emily's father sacrificed his life for it. How could you abandon her and marry someone else?" another neighbor added. The scene became even more chaotic. Catherine still tried to argue back, but her parents quickly pulled her away. Michael stood there helpless, clearly never expecting things to spiral this badly. Uncle Jack turned to me, still sitting on the ground, and asked gently, "Emily, what do you want to do?" "Don't worry, Uncle Jack will make sure you get justice." Aunt Linda and the neighbors rushed over to help me up, trying to persuade me. "Everyone makes mistakes. Michael just got confused for a moment. Since the marriage isn't official yet, you two should just go back home and live your life together." But I refused firmly. "No, Uncle Jack. Since he doesn't want to be with me anymore, I want a divorce, but I have one condition: the child must stay with me." My words stunned everyone. Aunt Linda tugged at me, whispering urgently, "Emily, if you divorce, how will you raise your child all by yourself?" The neighbors tried to persuade me too. Every man makes mistakes. As long as he's willing to change, things can still be fixed. They only saw Michael's momentary confusion. They didn't know that in my previous life, I had wasted an entire lifetime on him. With determination, I looked straight at Uncle Jack and said, "After my father's accident, that job should have gone to me. But because I married Michael, we let him take it. Now that we're getting divorced and I'm left alone with a child, can the factory give the job back to me?" Uncle Jack thought for a moment, then nodded firmly. "Don't worry, Emily, I'll take care of it." Hearing that I wanted to reclaim the job, Michael immediately panicked. "You're a woman. You've been at home for so long, you have no idea how dangerous it is out there. It's not safe for you to take a job like that while raising a child. Let's just live like before. You stay home and take care of the kid." "I'll send you money every month," Michael said. Catherine chimed in, sneering, "You're just a country woman. What kind of work can you possibly do? Wouldn't it be easier to stay home, take care of the kid, and enjoy the money?" Catherine looked quite fashionable, especially with her wedding makeup, and she was indeed pretty. Thinking back to my previous life, they lived in a big house in the city, drove a nice car, while my daughter and I scrimped and saved, barely able to buy a single dress for her after months of saving. I didn't want to live a life begging for scraps ever again. My attitude was firm. This is the job my father left behind. It should be mine to claim. Not only am I taking my job back, but I'm also taking back the money that belongs to me. I pulled out a small notebook I had carried with me. Every household expense over the years was recorded clearly in it. This is every expense I've shouldered over the years, I said coldly. Michael earned 180 yuan a month, but he only sent 20 yuan home each month. I covered all the household expenses, the social obligations, even my in-laws' medical bills. For example, right now I borrowed 200 yuan from our neighbors and Uncle Jack for Mom's hospital fees. Altogether, over these 3 years, it's 1,560 yuan. Uncle Jack, he should pay me back, shouldn't he? Michael's face grew darker and darker. Catherine couldn't listen anymore. She snapped, "You're making outrageous demands just because you want a divorce. How do we even know these records are real?" I glanced at her with disdain and said, "Half of Michael's salary was rightfully mine. You don't get a say here. I haven't even brought up the fact that you, as a mistress, shamelessly interfered in my marriage. How dare you argue with me?" Catherine's face turned gray, and she fell silent. Seizing the moment, I raised my voice. "If you don't pay up, I'll make sure everyone at your workplace finds out you married a man who already had a wife. Let's see how you'll hold your head up after that." I turned, ready to head toward the stage, but Catherine's parents quickly rushed over to stop me. They hurriedly whispered to Michael, "The guests are still waiting for the wedding ceremony. Settle this quickly." Michael glanced back at them, resentment written all over his face, but finally nodded reluctantly. Fine, I'll agree to everything." But he claimed he didn't have that much cash on him and insisted on writing an IOU, promising to pay me later. I immediately refused. "You're throwing a wedding and you claim you're short on money? Ridiculous. If I let you owe me, I'll never see that money again." Catherine, gritting her teeth, pulled out a wad of cash from her purse, counted it, and slammed it down on the table. I picked up the money, 1,560 yuan, not a penny more or less. Turning to Aunt Linda and the neighbors, I called out, "Everyone, you've seen everything today. Please help me explain it clearly to my in-laws later. Since Michael claims we never registered our marriage, it's like all the years I spent raising our daughter were for nothing." The neighbors were stunned. None of them had expected me to be so firm and decisive. Aunt Linda turned around and scolded Michael. "Your mother's lying in the hospital waiting for surgery, and here you are holding a wedding. What a great son you are." When we left the hotel, Uncle Jack comforted me, saying he would go back to the factory and discuss the situation with the leadership. He promised me they would give me a proper explanation and told me not to worry. After battling through the whole afternoon, none of us had eaten. Our stomachs were rumbling with hunger. I suggested treating everyone to a bowl of noodles at a roadside stall, but Aunt Linda and the other neighbors all firmly refused. "You're a single mother now. Life's not going to be easy for you. Keep the money for yourself. We came all this way to visit your in-laws. We can afford our own meal. Let us treat you instead," they said warmly. I hesitated, my expression not looking good, wanting to say something but stopping myself. Aunt Linda noticed and asked, "Emily, if there's anything else, just say it. As long as we can help, we definitely will." I gave her a deep, meaningful look and said softly, "When I wanted to hold a funeral for Michael, my in-laws did everything they could to stop me. This time, when I wanted to come to the city to find him, they tried to block me again. For years I've taken care of everything in the household, inside and out. But somehow, I've always felt like they never truly trusted me." As I spoke, my eyes reddened with emotion. Aunt Linda and the neighbors immediately understood there was a deeper meaning behind my words. They exchanged glances and quickly spoke up. No wonder when Michael got into trouble, his parents didn't seem worried at all. Everyone else used to say they were just getting senile with age, but now it seemed likely they had known all along. They were all in on it, except for me. "Think about it," someone added. "A few days ago, your father-in-law wouldn't even let you set up a memorial photo. Now that we think about it, when he received Michael's farewell letter, he wasn't even anxious. It's obvious they must have known the truth." Everyone started talking over each other, expressing their anger and promising to stand up for me. "Those two old foxes. You slaved away for them, took care of the family, gave them grandchildren, and they all ganged up to bully you. How cruel. Even if they didn't care about you, they should at least think about their granddaughter." Don't worry, Emily, they said. We're with you. If they treat you without compassion, don't feel guilty about standing up for yourself. We'll make sure they give you an answer today. We entered the hospital room. Before I could say anything, Aunt Linda marched up and scolded my in-laws loudly. Michael's getting married to another woman outside. Did you know that? My father-in-law's eyes darted around as he quickly turned away, muttering, "Don't talk nonsense. Michael just needed some time to clear his head." But Aunt Linda wouldn't let it go. Not just me, more than a dozen pairs of eyes saw it with their own eyes. Are we all lying? You refused to let us go to the city before because you already knew he was planning to marry someone else, didn't you? My mother-in-law, lying in bed, looked terrified. She stammered, "No, it can't be. What a coincidence." But after realizing what she had said, she immediately clamped her mouth shut. It was too late. Everyone had heard it. I didn't bother playing along anymore. Right there in front of all the neighbors, I spoke up. Michael and I are divorced. He took the job that was supposed to be mine after my father's accident, but now the factory has agreed to give it back to me. Hearing that, Michael's mother clutched her chest and stayed silent, while his father glared at me furiously. "He's your husband. How could you be so heartless?" he barked. I glanced at him coldly and said, "When you encouraged your son to marry someone else, did you remember he was my husband, Michael?" Michael's father's face turned red, but he was speechless. "After we got married, your entire family moved into the house my parents left me. Now that we're divorced, you'll have to move out of that house too." Back in the village, I didn't even need to say a word. News of Michael getting married in the city spread like wildfire, even reaching the neighboring villages. My parents had left behind a small brick house. It was one of the first brick houses built in the village back then. After my parents passed away, Michael's entire family moved in. I asked Aunt Linda for help, and she wasted no time gathering some of the village women and young men. In no time, they helped me move all of Michael's family's belongings out of the house. That night, I cooked a pot of braised pork. Sitting in the now empty house, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. After 2 lifetimes of bitterness, I had finally cleared the score. As my daughter and I were happily eating, grease running down our chins, there was a sudden urgent knock on the door. I quickly settled my daughter and went to open it. Standing there was Michael's father, pushing a cart with Michael's mother lying on it. Michael's father pointed at me furiously and started yelling, "Your mom's sick. How could you be so heartless, turning us away like this? Don't you have any respect for your elders? Didn't you learn anything growing up?" Instead of getting angry, I let out a cold laugh. My parents are already buried underground. Where did these new parents of mine come from? This house was left to me by my mom and dad. Your house is across the road. Don't get confused. As I spoke, I moved to shut the door, but Michael's father blocked it. At that moment, Aunt Linda's door creaked open. She came into my yard, and under the light, she clearly saw it was Michael's parents causing the commotion. Without hesitation, she started shouting, "You two are old enough to know better. How shameless can you get, sneaking around at midnight to steal from the orphaned girl?" Her loud voice quickly drew attention. "Come and see, everyone," she yelled. "These 2 old scoundrels are trying to steal from a widow and orphan." Aunt Linda had always been feisty and her voice was naturally loud. After just a couple of shouts, Michael's father hurriedly pushed the cart and dragged his wife away in panic. Aunt Linda was still fuming and shouted after them, "If you dare come back again, don't blame me for not being polite." Before she left, Aunt Linda added worriedly, "I heard Michael's new wife doesn't have the money to pay for his mom's treatment, so they checked her out of the hospital. If they come bothering you again, just shout for me across the yard." I thanked Aunt Linda sincerely and watched her leave, my heart bubbling with a sort of giddy amusement as I glanced across the road. Back when we all lived together, anything good to eat or drink would go to Michael's parents first. My daughter would only get a bite every now and then. They used to say it was the old family rule, but now, barely a day after Michael's wedding, they had been kicked out of the hospital. Serves them right. The next day, Uncle Jack came riding his bicycle to the village just to find me. He told me that after a meeting at the factory, the management had decided Michael Evans was officially fired, and I could take his place. Considering I was a woman raising a child alone, the factory said they would assign me to a special position. I packed my things simply, sat my 2-year-old daughter on the rear rack of Uncle Jack's bicycle, and we headed to the city. The early spring wind was chilly against my face, but my heart was filled with excitement. This time, I would firmly seize control of my own fate. At first, the factory leaders wanted to assign me to a logistics position, but I firmly declined. I knew that in a few years, state-owned enterprises would start collapsing. In my previous life, Michael had sensed the coming shift early while working in sales. When the factory fell apart, he used his connections and resources to thrive on his own. That's why, this time, I insisted on joining the sales department. To accommodate me, the factory provided me with a small single dormitory, just enough space for my daughter and me. I enrolled her in the factory's daycare, and for the house back in the village, I entrusted Aunt Linda to watch over it. If anything happened, she would call the factory. Every Monday morning, I would send my daughter to school and pick her up every Friday evening. I felt like I had endless energy. Within 6 months, I had become the top salesperson in the factory. Everyone said I was bold and hardworking, but only I knew how much this second chance meant to me. Years later, when the state-owned factory restructured, I voluntarily applied for layoff. By then, I had saved some money, borrowed a little from friends, and started my own business selling home appliances. At first, it was just a tiny shop, but as business grew, I opened more and more stores. Eventually, I became too busy to manage them all myself, and had to start hiring staff. One day, while I was busy at the shop, someone came to apply for a job. I looked up and nearly didn't recognize him. It was Michael Evans. In my previous life, after working in factory sales, Michael had borrowed money from Catherine's uncle to start his own appliance dealership and became one of the first successful agents. But in this life, after being fired from the factory, I heard he had tried many different jobs, but his ambitions always exceeded his abilities. He either thought the work was too hard or the salary too low. In the past, with the factory backing him, Catherine's uncle had thought highly of him. But in this life, after several failed businesses, he couldn't borrow another cent. Now standing in front of me, Michael's expression was complicated, probably a mix of envy and regret. He forced a smile and said flatteringly, "I heard you've opened quite a few stores now. We're old acquaintances, right? Since you're hiring, why not make me a store manager or something?" I gave a slight smirk and said lightly, "If you're starving, I can treat you to a meal. But I've never heard of a beggar demanding to be king." Michael was so furious he trembled all over. "Emily, don't you forget, you wouldn't have today without your ex-husband's help. You ought to be grateful. You just wait and see." With that, he stormed out, humiliated. I thought that was probably not the end of it. Sure enough, 2 days later, an old man and an old woman with white hair appeared at the entrance of my store. As soon as they saw me, they rushed over and grabbed my hand. "Emily, we're your parents. How can you get rich and forget about us?" I froze in place. Parents. Looking closer, I realized it was Michael's parents. The old man hunched over pathetically. The old woman coughed non-stop, clutching my arm tightly, refusing to let me leave. "You and Michael were husband and wife once," she rasped. "Michael is Yaya's only father. Even if you don't care about Michael, you should think about Yaya. Listen, even though you two are divorced, you will always be our only daughter-in-law in our hearts. You have so many stores now. What's one more? Just let Michael manage one." I was so disgusted I almost gagged. I shook off their hands and pointed toward the street. Not far away, Catherine was standing at the entrance to my shop, her belly visibly pregnant. I had already noticed her earlier but hadn't said anything, afraid she'd barge into the shop and cause a scene. I had been planning to step outside and call someone for help. Now an idea flashed through my mind. "Your daughter-in-law is standing right there," I said, my voice cold. "At your age, how can you still be so shameless? Should I call your daughter-in-law over right now?" Catherine's face turned pale. Michael's parents had been shouting loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear, and there was no doubt Catherine had heard everything. Before I could even say another word, Catherine, like a crazy hen, grabbed a street sweeper's broom and stormed over. "I didn't know you only care about money," she shrieked. Today you're going to explain everything clearly." She rushed at them, waving the broom wildly. Michael's father was quick on his feet and managed to dodge, but his mother, coughing heavily and unable to run, took several hard hits on the back. And so the farce ended in complete chaos. But the next day, Catherine showed up again. She sat at the entrance of my shop, her pregnant belly on full display, and said, "You wouldn't even have these shops if it weren't for the compensation we gave you back then. These stores belong to us too. You have to at least give us 2 of them. Otherwise, I'm not leaving." As she spoke, she pushed her belly forward and dragged a chair right to the front door, sitting firmly in the entrance. Whenever someone tried to enter, she would block them, loudly proclaiming the store was closed. As a pregnant woman, she knew we couldn't lay a hand on her, and she took full advantage of it. My employees were in a panic, asking me what to do. Even if we called the police, the most they could do was try to mediate. On the first day, not a single customer managed to get inside. The next day, I had a plan. I called a van and asked Aunt Linda to gather 7 or 8 women from the village, all over 70 years old. I paid them each 50 yuan a day as a hardship fee. By the time Michael dragged Catherine back to the shop entrance, the old ladies were already there, sitting in a neat row at the door, happily munching on sunflower seeds and chatting away. Whenever Catherine tried to enter the shop, Aunt Linda and her crew would shift to block her. If she moved east, they moved east. If she moved west, they moved west. No matter where she went, they surrounded her so tightly, there wasn't even a crack to slip through. Standing by the door, I couldn't help but laugh. "You want to use a pregnant belly to threaten me? Fine, I'll use a wall of grandmas to deal with you." Seeing that she couldn't get in, Catherine grew more and more frustrated, stomping her feet in anger. Michael rushed over, trying to persuade the old ladies. "Aunties, we just want to take a look inside the store. Why are you blocking us? We're all neighbors after all." Aunt Linda spat out a sunflower seed shell and said disdainfully, "We're just sitting here enjoying the sun. We're not blocking anything." Nobody paid Michael or Catherine any attention. When customers tried to approach the shop, Catherine, spotting an opening, tried to dash inside. She charged forward recklessly, but just as she was about to collide with the old ladies, they neatly parted ways. Caught off balance, Catherine stumbled and fell straight onto the ground. She immediately started wailing, "Help! Someone's bullying a pregnant woman." The old ladies kept munching their seeds, looking completely innocent. "Did we touch her?" they said. No, we didn't touch her at all. We all saw it. She fell on her own." Catherine clutched her belly and cried out in pain. But there was nothing she could do. In the end, Michael had no choice but to rush her to the hospital. Still furious, they reported the incident to the police. When the officers arrived and questioned everyone, all the elderly women insisted firmly that Catherine had tripped and fallen on her own. Seeing a group of silver-haired grandmas sitting there so innocently, the police couldn't find any fault and had no choice but to leave it at that. The 2 of them didn't get a single advantage out of it. Instead, Catherine ended up breaking her tailbone from the fall. She was sent back to Michael's parents' home to be taken care of. According to Aunt Linda, Catherine was incredibly spoiled. She demanded big, extravagant meals every day, asking for abalone, sea cucumber, and other delicacies. Michael's parents were simple farmers and couldn't meet her demands. The old lady coughed constantly, but Catherine refused to eat anything she cooked, accusing her of spitting into the food. Every day, Aunt Linda would stuff her pockets with sunflower seeds and stand at the door with the other old ladies, watching the drama unfold. When Catherine said she wanted chicken, Michael's mother had no choice but to feed her pumpkin after pumpkin. In fact, she ended up giving her more than a dozen pumpkins, and she went around complaining to everyone that her daughter-in-law, who hadn't even given birth yet, had already eaten over a dozen of their pumpkins. One day, while the old lady was outside grumbling about her ungrateful daughter-in-law, someone suddenly shouted, "Fire! Fire!" Everyone looked up and realized that flames were roaring through the back courtyard of Michael's house. The fire spread rapidly. Half the house was soon engulfed in flames. Catherine stood in the courtyard laughing like a madwoman. "That's what you get for feeding me nothing but pumpkins. Eat, eat until your whole family dies," she screamed. Michael's parents panicked and rushed into the burning house, trying to save what they could. But the fire was too fierce, and the house was made of mud bricks. It collapsed quickly. Someone called the fire department, and the police arrived as well. Catherine cried and claimed that because she was pregnant and her mother-in-law had been feeding her nothing but pumpkins, she had tried to cook chicken for herself, but accidentally caused the fire due to her inexperience. After the police finished their investigation, they determined it was a domestic dispute and could only try to mediate. But Michael's father was found unconscious from smoke inhalation, and his mother had her leg broken when a beam collapsed on her. Michael was now stuck caring for his two paralyzed parents in the hospital, while also looking after a pregnant Catherine. Aunt Linda, full of gossip, came to tell me everything, chuckling. "Emily, you wouldn't believe how miserable Michael Evans is right now. They dumped the kid onto him too. Now he has to care for a comatose mother, a crippled father, and a newborn. Listen to me, girl, what goes around comes around. Retribution always finds its time." I smiled, handing her a bag full of fruit. "Thank you, Aunt Linda. Without your help, my shop wouldn't be standing today." Aunt Linda waved her hand dismissively. "We're all women. Women should support each other. Seeing you doing well makes me happy too." I gripped Aunt Linda's hand tightly, my heart full of gratitude. I knew my life was only going to get better from here.